Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Future Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Wells, joined today by co-host Dustin Myers. We are partners at Longitude Branding, a hospitality branding and experience design agency. At Future Hospitality, our goal is to interview the brightest minds in the industry, gathering insights, ideas, and inspiration to share with you. Today, we're joined by Anthony Langan. Anthony is Corporate Director of Food and Beverage for Charlestowne Hotels out of Charleston, South Carolina. Anthony will be sharing his experience and ideas around food and beverage for the hotel industry and the important role that it plays. He'll also share a little bit about his background growing up in the industry and how that shaped his career. So, let's go ahead and jump in. First of all, Anthony, thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to speak with us here. This is the first episode of Future Hospitality, as you see behind us in the background. Future Hospitality. Dustin, do you want to describe kind of what the podcast, like the purpose of it and why we wanted to start it?
Yeah, so Future Hospitality is a lot of interviews and just trying to stay on the cutting edge of the hospitality industry. So looking at future trends to watch for, as well as timeless principles from the past that we can continue to build on and evolve. So really we're just interviewing some of the brightest minds in the hospitality industry and seeing how design, branding, architecture, food and beverage, all the different aspects of it can come together to create a really memorable experience.
Yeah.
Interviewing the brightest minds, you're stuck with me for the first one.
So you get the honor of being the first guest here, so which is really cool for us.
No, and I love what you guys are doing too. I think it's awesome. I think we need more, and I'm surprised that there's not, but I think we need more outlets like this, more conversations like this going on. As big as our industry is, it's surprising how little of this there is.
Yeah, and we kind of saw a need for something like that, plus something like this, a format like this. Plus, it's just exciting for us to get to talk to people like yourself that are doing really, really awesome stuff, and just kind of learn from you and get some of your insights. So, I met, for those of you watching, I met Anthony. I think we connected before the holidays last year. We just I saw some of the work that he was doing at the time. He was with Vision Hospitality, right? And and over the time that I first met him, he's been making a transition from Vision to Charlestown Hotel Group. Is that the proper name of theirs?
Charlestowne Hotels.
Hotels, yeah. So so he's kind of in the middle of a transition right now, which I'm sure requires you're moving and stuff, and moving the family.
Yeah, it's all the life stuff, packing boxes and things like that.
Yeah. So Anthony and I kind of briefly discussed for a little bit on the phone just before, a few weeks ago, and it was really neat to kind of hear his story from where he came from growing up, even in the hospitality industry, and it was really kind of cool hearing it from him. I thought it was personally really cool, and I'd like, Anthony, if you could kind of share your kind of journey from childhood even all the way up to where you're at, and kind of you mentioned growing up in the hospitality industry and kind of seeing the ins and outs of it. What was that like for you?
Yeah, and it really does start at the beginning, kind of, for me. So when I was born, my dad was a bellman and my mom was the bartender at the Marriott in St. Louis. And my mom would eventually become a teacher, but my dad has stayed in the hotel business throughout his life, and then my entire life. So I kind of grew up in and around hotels. Some of my earliest memories in life are in hotels. I remember walking into my dad's office when I was a kid and seeing like the big chair that he was sitting in at the time, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. I've always loved hotels from the time I was a kid, and so I always knew that I wanted to be in the hotel industry, be a part of the hotel industry. And as I kind of started getting, I worked any job you can think of. I was a maintenance tech and a front desk agent, and I drove a hotel shuttle for a while, which was actually one of the cooler jobs to and from Midway Airport in Chicago.
Yes.
But yeah, then it sort of blossomed into an opportunity in hotel F&B more specifically, and that's something that I fell even further in love with.
So did you go to college and get some sort of hospitality management degree also, or did you go for like what kind of transitioned you from like the childhood experience to like your professional experience?
Yeah, it was a lot of things. It was I went for business administration at Illinois State University. Would work different jobs in different parts of the hotel industry, and then after college, the first opportunity that I got for a management role in the hotel industry is as an assistant outlets manager. So outlets, restaurant, bar, and room service, and that was at the Chicago Mart Plaza, which is connected to the Merchandise Mart in downtown Chicago. And I didn't, I had some food and beverage experience at the time. I had worked in restaurants, busser, host. I think I had a lot of hospitality jobs over time, but I was struck by a lot of things about that job pretty much right away. One of the interesting things is, so the check-in experience, right? Somebody walks up to the front desk and they're checking into the hotel, and they're there for like 3 minutes in total. But then I had them in the restaurant for an hour and in the bar at night for an hour. And there's so much focus on the hotel side, but I thought, man, there's this huge opportunity. We have so much more time with them in food and beverage. I mean, that's a real chance to make an impact on someone's stay. So that kind of got me hooked.
Yeah, it seems like especially over recent years, like the focus for hotels on food and beverage has kind of come into the front light for a lot of people in their mind. And it seems like, you were kind of noticing that years ago. What kind of made that?
Yeah.
Was it just the noticing of the time spent at the front desk, or was there something else that made it kind of click for you? Like we need to be focusing on food and beverage. There's a lot of value to add here to hotels. Is that, what kind of led to that, I guess, change of thought for you? Or was it something you always kind of just knew inherently?
Yeah, no, I kind of observed the fact that we had that time, and then was also struck by the fact that, I think for a long time, and it's funny how, there are sort of cycles with everything. I think a long time ago, if you wanted to go out to a nice dinner with your family, you went to the hotel. You would go to a hotel for a dinner, or if it's a holiday. That was like a great place to go get a meal. And then when I came into the industry, it was still at that point where it was firmly in amenity territory at most properties. You weren't going out of your way to go to a hotel restaurant. You're probably just having breakfast there before you went out for the day. Maybe you had one drink at the bar at night, but you certainly weren't going out of your way. It was a matter of convenience and an amenity more than anything, which seemed like a missed opportunity. And I think that the industry has started to realize that. And you see kind of these ebbs and flows and different trends. And so when I was starting off in Chicago, we opened one of the first hotel sky bars, rooftop bars in Chicago. And like that whole wave then of rooftop bars, like every hotel got one, every hotel had a bar on top of it. Fast forward 7 years later, and I'm in Nashville and opened the first hotel rooftop bar in Nashville. And it was funny to see then every hotel kind of start doing the exact same thing. And there is this interesting phenomenon where if you look to like the bigger cities, if you look to the New York, Chicago's, LA's, and see the trends that are emerging there today, you can carry those forward to other markets, and usually beat the competition to market. So that's kind of one thing I saw over time. But no, it's an ever evolving business, and one that struck me as a big opportunity early on, for sure.
Yeah, I find it interesting that I think a lot of hotels would view the food and beverage side as just additional revenue. But in your mind, it's a huge opportunity to impact the guest. So I guess in that line of thinking, like, what have you seen from successful hotels being able to integrate their hotel strategy with the food and beverage side, and how have you seen that impact being made?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it can, when you got that much time with somebody, it can go one of two ways for you, for sure. So but really food and beverage can be your best ally in the hotel business. If something goes wrong in a room, there is no better way to recover that guest than with food and beverage, whether it's, something small to the room, come have dinner with us, let me buy you a drink, and vice versa. I think it works both ways, and that rooms and F&B relationship is important. If maybe things don't go well in the bar and we have to go to the front desk and say, hey guys, what do you think we can do for Mr. and Mrs. Johnson? They didn't like the drinks. So I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. One great thing about hotel F&B, I think, is sometimes in independent restaurants and bars, the culture can be different, back of house and front of house, and that's good and bad in a lot of cases. But the bad is minimized in a hotel setting because you have this underlying hospitality culture of this larger business. So I've always loved that. I think really to drive that home, the big focus, and it should always be on experience. And we talk about a lot of other things. We get sort of caught up a lot of times talking about the sexy stuff. Like, I love a good branded napkin as much as anybody else, but like that's not a brand experience, that's a napkin, and nobody really cares. So, pulling through pieces of your brand, your hotel identity, your F&B outlet identity, pulling that through into the guest experience in like a really genuine way, that's where the impact is made. So one example, and something Jeremy and I talked about, is with Vision, we opened a gin bar in Memphis called the Greyhound, and it's built on top of the site of what was an old Greyhound bus terminal. And Greyhound's, classic gin cocktail. So there's an opportunity in the market as well. So everything kind of worked out for that. So then how do you pull that brand through to life? So we took an old, the Greyhound bus schedule that you get, and shows you, what's going where and when, and turn that into like a little order ticket that you had at your table, and you could fill out. It was essentially like a tableside gin and tonic program. So you could select your gin, select your tonic, select your any like mixers and garnishes, and then we would bring this really nice West Elm cart tableside and make this gin and tonic for you right there. And you can't do that with every drink. You pick your spots, but that's the like maximizing the value proposition for a guest in a way that makes sense to your brand identity. I think that's sort of how you do it, more than just like, our napkin says the Greyhound.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. I love that concept. When we were talking about it, it just sounded like a really cool place. That's still around. What is it called?
Yeah, it's called the Greyhound.
The Greyhound. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Did you ever like you mentioned like you put in these two new, like brand new like rooftop bars that were kind of new for the area?
Hmm.
Was there ever any time, whether it was those moments or other times, where you experienced maybe like a little pushback as far as introducing, some food and beverage to a hotel or to an experience or to, you kind of had to do some convincing to kind of get people on board? Because it seems like there might
Yeah.
be moments where like you said, like some people might not realize the value of it or realize how it can play into it. Have you ever ran into that where you kind of had to do a little extra work to get everyone on board?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what's funny is that's a great question, and like almost every time, to some degree, there really is like so one of the two rooftop bars was a rooftop bar in Nashville called Up, a rooftop lounge, and it sits on top of a Fairfield Inn and Suites. Now, that's not exactly what you would think, like sexy rooftop bar in Nashville. You wouldn't think, oh, of course it's on top of a Fairfield. So there is this initial like, do two things go together? But what we found is that, people, first of all, that's a great Fairfield. That's an incredible hotel. Shout out to them. But they bought in faster than I thought they would. When we executed on, what we were promising, we delivered the experience, we had the great views. People didn't care as much anymore about the name on the hotel. If we could get them an image of our drinks, the view, all of a sudden that conversation about the hotel brand didn't matter as much. And I think being smart about, there was a separate elevator that just ran from the first floor directly to the rooftop. So you could bypass part of the experience. We even changed the lights and the music inside the elevator just to make it feel very different. But yeah, there's that one. There's, a really high-end rooftop bar that we did a couple years ago in Chattanooga called Whiskey Thief. And that was a very different kind of experience for the market. So people weren't really used to, in Chattanooga, going to a bar and not being able to get in. And, how do you, it was off-putting, and kind of working through the messaging of that. Like, no, we want you in here. We really do. But we just don't want to jam you in. Like, it's not a shot and a beer place. Right. You can't we're not slinging, Bud Lights and Jaeger. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm a Budweiser guy myself, actually. But for the experience that we were delivering there to that customer, we had to cut off the number of people that can come in at a certain time, and there's pushback on that. So I think it's all how you talk to the community about who you are, communicating on social media. If you're running an F&B outlet and you've got a private event and you're going to be closed, tell people, for sure. Tell people, tell them on social media that you're closed that night. Get that word out to them. Talk to the hotel valets. As soon as somebody pulls up in their car, don't let them get all the way out and get all the way up there and then find out you're closed. Like, make it as easy as possible for people to know, hey, this is who we are and this is what's going on. And I think that's how you work through a lot of those problems. But yeah, it's funny. I think like every spot has a little bit of that.
It's awesome.
Yeah, just one follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
So on the Greyhound specifically, that sounds like a very, very well executed pull-through on the brand concept and all of that. When you're working with interior designers, architects, maybe a branding agency, the in-house team, how have you seen, I guess, when those projects really just all come together, what works differently on those as opposed to one that might be more fragmented?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and something that I saw early on when I got in the development side was there a lot of times there were these conversations where it was designers kind of designing in a bubble, the identities created in a bubble, and all these people do kind of talk back and forth about it, but there can be this hard line between that and operations that I think is kind of missing a really big opportunity to engage folks in operations early on in the process. The location of that server station matters. What are the the MEP, the data and the power for your POS terminals? Like, do we have the right things in the right spots? I think when it goes well, everyone is kind of open and having conversations. And one of the hardest parts about it is setting ego aside, and that it's super tough. And I'm sure you guys could speak to this, especially earlier in your career. You create this thing, right? And you have this idea, and it's great, and then you send it out to the world, and it's a hard lesson to learn that everything you do that you just poured your heart and soul into is about to get judged, and maybe not always as nicely as you would like. So I think having a spirit of openness and knowing that, hey, you can throw out 100 ideas, 99 of them might be no, but that 100th one may be the one that makes a difference, and just being resilient enough to not stop, and working with a team that is willing to listen.
It's really good.
Yeah. Cool. So as kind of the theme of the podcast, is the future of hospitality and kind of what that looks like, and everyone's kind of take on that. As it relates even, to what you do specifically, and then maybe even outside of that a little bit, like, how do you see, and like, whether it's some trends or just the way that the market's moving, how do you see the future of hospitality, in the next 5, 10 plus years? What significant things are going to be changing? Is it, more recently it's been like the introduction of like creating experience and, really focusing on that, outside of just amenities alone, but actually creating like, an experience for a traveler. There's been focuses on the food and beverage aspect. There's been other focuses on different things. Do you have any idea of like where the hospitality industry is going, and just kind of like guessing, your best guess about where it's going to go into the future?
So one thing I always think is, you hear this type of question asked like on panels, and I kind of laugh inside, because like when I see all the executives lined up on stage and they're getting interviewed, and they're like, what technology or what's the future of hospitality look like? And down the line it's like, well, with Airbnb, like it's the same kind of answer, which I think speaks to a broader problem with the industry, because that, like, if you're talking about that as the future, like that future's already here. So we're way past that being the future. That future will continue to evolve, but I just always think it's funny because you can queue up the Airbnb answer with most people. But I do think to that, I think we'll continue to see, lodging, especially in brands. I think hotels will become increasingly decentralized. So there will be less of an emphasis needed, I think, on traditional brands in some markets in particular. Larger markets, certainly, you already see that. But smaller markets as well. I mean, you used to be driving down the road and you would see Holiday Inn, and you knew that there was a clean bed and, friendly staff and standards there. And maybe the Johnson Inn, or the Langan Inn, maybe you didn't know what to expect from that place. But now, I mean, with the internet, the world will tell you exactly what that place is. So there's less of that need to rely on brands. And I think hotel owners and management companies are becoming increasingly comfortable with taking the chance to go out on their own and create something, a brand, and experience themselves. I think the goal is sort of like, so when you think of a Disney resort, you go to Disney World with your family. The minute you hit the resort, it doesn't matter if you're in your room, in the lobby, in the park, you never leave that experience. You're in that experience in your hotel room. You're in that experience the entire time. And in, if it's a traditional chain hotel, I think, that experience at some point stops, and you could be in the lobby of any hotel in any city in the country. But I think you'll see more and more that experience kind of pull through. So the city, like in more meaningful and genuine ways, will come into the hotel more and more often, and into restaurants and bars more often. I think in terms of technology and trends and things, one that I find interesting is like digital education. So in the amount, we were joking earlier, but like the amount you learn from YouTube nowadays it can be incredible, what you can learn there. And I'm actually doing a thing now. Have you guys heard of a website called edX?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm taking an edX class on connected strategy. It's
Nice.
Two professors from the Wharton School of Business. So the ability to have access to like that type of education and that type of growth is only growing, and I think there's a big opportunity in us, as management companies, as owners, to how do we continue to teach and educate the people that work with us and ourselves. And I think deploying digital platforms, whether it's short learnings, long coursework, I think there's a big opportunity there to continue to, elevate our whole workforce with us. Like, it's not enough for me to just learn something. Like, I need to bring people with me, because I have yet to ever do anything by myself in this business, and I doubt I ever will. So I think focusing on educating other people and bringing them up with you is super important. Sort of a weird one I think about that could become a big factor in the businesses. So autonomous driving, and this is sort of an odd one, but so I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee right now, and I grew up in Chicago, and Chattanooga sits basically halfway between Chicago, Wisconsin, Northwest Indiana, Michigan, and Florida. So what you have seen in Chattanooga for decades is families or people who are traveling from the north to Florida will stay over in Chattanooga. It's becoming more of a destination on its own, but like a significant portion of the lodging nights in the city were dependent on that travel. Now, what happens if 5-10 years down the road, if I don't have to drive? If I'm, whether it's an autonomous ride share, or if it's my own autonomous vehicle, and I don't have to worry about like holding onto the steering wheel and being glued to it for 10 hours, and that's all I can do. I need a place to crash. I think that'll probably have a bigger impact than people realize currently.
It's really
and also, I'd like to, it's a weird one, but I'd also like to just put our food and drink in cars and just send it to them. So that's all.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that you brought up an interesting point. You kind of joked about the Airbnb thing, but I've read a couple articles, I think recently even, about how even though Airbnb has changed, the landscape, and everyone talks about it, it's a buzzword at this point to kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
I think there's the one unique factor, especially on the food and beverage side, when you're talking about adding in that level of experience to a hotel. It's really
Yeah.
a unique selling point it can be a unique selling point for a hotel.
100%.
Just because, Airbnb can't really deliver, at least currently, deliver an experience like that that's so integrated. And, I just think that's a really interesting point there.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. Yeah, that is a big differentiator for sure. Yeah, that's a huge one.
I also thought, I forgot to mention this earlier, but you had mentioned how at the hotels that you added a rooftop bar, there was kind of an importance of putting like a separate entrance, a separate elevator even for that experience, kind of segmenting out the travelers that are staying at the hotel versus like locals. Like, what sort of emphasis there do you think is important to have between both groups?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I almost I think sometimes I don't even think about it anymore because it's so automatic, but it's almost like you're not making any of it for the hotel guest in a lot of ways. You take that into consideration, in a lot of things you do, and making it easy for them to access it, and maybe programs that are specific to them, benefits that travel into the room. But that restaurant, that bar, winning in hotel F&B requires you to bring in guests from the outside to have a truly unique experience and really deliver something special. I think it's hard to survive on just the hotel guest alone. But if you design with something that, hey, we want this to be the spot for the community, because the question you always get from the hotel guests is, well, where do the locals go? And if you can just say, oh, they go right here. They go to the bar at the place that you're already at. You're going to get the hotel guest then at that point. So I think, I really probably would disproportionately focus on the local community and something that is cool and a draw to them and a great experience for them, and that will win you your hotel guests.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess last question here, kind of circling back to just you and kind of where you're going personally and professionally. What would you say like your future in this industry, in the hospitality industry, looks like? And what plans do you have? What ambitions do you have? And kind of moving forward.
And I feel lucky to get to do what I do, and this is the dream. Like, in terms of hotel F&B jobs, like corporate director of food and beverage for Charlestowne Hotels, like that's it doesn't get a whole lot better than that. I don't, that in itself is something I love and every day, love. So kind of working with a great team there, and just, I think more than anything, so there's this, I think it's, Richard Branson is the guy I'm looking for. So Richard Branson has this great quote, above all, you want to create something you're proud of. And that really resonates with me. I want to do things that Charlestown Hotels is proud of. I want to do things that I'm proud of, that my wife, be the kind of person, and personally and professionally, that my wife and kids are proud of. That's really what matters, I think, more than anything. Is, I do like to think that someday in the future, my kids they're 6, 4, and 2 now, so they're not going to be driving for a while, but I could picture them, if someday in the future they drive by a hotel or they drive by a restaurant or a bar, and they can say, my dad helped create that. and they're proud of me and of the things I've done, I think like that's the goal for sure.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, Anthony, I really appreciate you joining us today and taking the time out to do that.
No, thank you guys.
We're honored
awesome.
to speak with you, and I hope I know that the people listening will get a lot of value out of it. And so, Anthony, how can people learn more about you and Charlestown and whatnot? How can they, if someone wanted to reach out or just learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. Search for Anthony Langan and look for this space, and you'll find me. I also I've got some examples of F&B on a website called ontheflyfb.com, and Charlestowne Hotels and our incredible portfolio there. You can check out at charlestownehotels.com. So
it's a very, very, very cool website, and the portfolio is really, really cool. So I'm excited for you.
Thanks, man.
So
thanks, brother.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. And until next time, thank you everyone for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Future Hospitality Podcast. If you enjoyed today's topic and episode, please leave us a review. You can also find us on Instagram at Future Hospitality and on Facebook by searching for Future Hospitality.